A while back, the question was posed of how we can go about creating proxies inside of Karma and Solaris. And there's actually a couple of different ways that you can manage polygon count inside of your viewport. So I figured we would take a look at that today. So I have a simple scene here set up just with settings already. So a camera, light, our render settings, and then a material library with a Material X standard surface in here with a base color set to red just to give us a little bit more of a visual cue of what's actually happening. So let's drop in a SOP create to create our first geometry, and I'm just going to create a cube here. And this is going to demonstrate the first method. So we also need a second node, which is going to be the configure primitive node. And in here, we can select this draw mode. There's a ton of options in here, but for the draw mode, this is going to affect what we see in the viewport. So by default, it's set to full geometry, and we have a few other options here. So origin axis, bounding box, which you're probably going to be familiar with from other render engines if you've ever used proxies in those, and then also texture cards as well. So that is going to update what we see in the viewport, but as we change to our renderer, it's going to render out the full geometry. So that's one way that you can go about managing the polygon counts in your scene. Just make it a little bit easier to maneuver your viewport. But you may not want to, either use texture cards or a bounding box to display what your geometry is going to look like. It's not really clear what's going on necessarily. You may want to actually use a proxy. And then the second way that we're going to take a look at is also going to use a configure primitive node, and that is also going to be creating the proxy. So we'll select this purpose here, and by default it's just going to set this to default, which is going to say that this is just the render geo and the proxy geo. So we're going to set this to render. We're going to just explicitly state that that is going to be our render geo, and I'm going to alt click and drag, create a second create node, and we're going to change this from a box to a sphere, and we'll change this to polygon and just up the frequency there. I'm also going to make a second configure primitive node. We'll wire this in, and we're going to change this purpose to proxy. Now we have one other problem that we have to figure out, which is we can't wire both of these into this input. So in order to do that, we need a sublayer node. And once we wire this in, we can wire in our second node. And we don't have any files, so let's go ahead and just select the sublayer inputs. That's just going to use the inputs because, like I said, we don't have any files that we're importing here. So we'll just use this sublayer inputs to keep things a little bit more clean. Now, as I change from our Houdini GL viewport to Karma, you're going to see that it switches from the sphere geometry to the box geometry, which is our render geo. And as we explicitly stated here, the sphere is our proxy. So that's just the second way that you can go about, managing your polygon counts inside of Solaris. Make your viewports run a little bit smoother and get a good idea of what's going on with your geometry. Now, obviously, a cube and a sphere are not the same object. They're not even close. Don't represent a good representation of a proxy object, but it's good for a demonstration purposes for this specific case. So hopefully this helps you out. I do have a bunch of other videos on working with Material X, Solaris, and Karma, so if you want to learn more about any of those, make sure you guys check those videos out. I also have a ton of stuff on Houdini in general, so if you want to learn more about Houdini, check those out. And also a bunch of stuff on Redshift inside of Houdini, so if you want to learn more about that, you can take a look at those videos as well. But anyways, like I said, hopefully this helped you out. Thank you guys for watching, and have a good day.